Hi, my name's Rosie Day. I'm Chief Strategy Officer here at City Property Association, and I'd like to say a very warm welcome to you all. Thank you for making the effort to be here this morning, especially considering all the disruption with the tube strikes. And also a very special welcome to those who are joining us online for our first ever live streamed CPA breakfast seminar, which we're very excited about and delighted you could be part of it. So very quick fire safety note. So if we're not expecting any fire alarms this morning, so if you hear an alarm, please head to the white doors with the green sign above them. I'd like to say a very big thank you to BGO for hosting us at this absolutely incredible space this morning. I'm delighted that for those who have joined us in person, there'll be building tours led by Alexander Morris, Managing Director here at BGO. If you'd like to join those tours, you can meet Alexander over at the AV desk after the panel discussion. So to move things on, I'm delighted to introduce Tom Meijer here from CBRE, who will be giving us a market update on the City Fringe. Tom.
See if this works. Great, good stuff. So I thought that given how close we are to Smithfield Market, I'd start with this amazing image from 1811. And this is back when Smithfield was a livestock market, about 50 years before it became a wholesale market in the 1860s. But the next few minutes aren't designed to be a history lesson, as I'm definitely not the right person to be giving that. But I will try and create a bit of a backdrop for the panel that we're going to have afterwards. And we have got some fantastic panelists. So we'll briefly look at how we define the City Fringe market, how investment in the area has really created and snowballed really support for communities of startups, how rental values and the occupier types have changed over time, and then we'll touch on the future of the City Fringe market and the development pipeline. So what do we see as the City Fringe? Well, there are various definitions and boundaries, but our house position at CBRE can be seen here, where the City Fringe wraps around the city core. And we break the City Fringe market down into three distinct sub-markets: Clerkenwell and Farringdon, where we are now, Old Street and Shoreditch, and Aldgate. And these sub-markets all have one main common theme, in that they have all been incredibly popular with slightly less corporate occupiers. This is originally driven by converted ex-warehouse buildings being a very cost-effective place to run a business with a nice close proximity to the heart of the city. And then initiatives like the government-backed Tech City initiative help solidify this, particularly around Shoreditch with the emergence of the Silicon Roundabout, which, believe it or not, first got discussed in 2008. This is probably a bit too detailed to view from the back, but I love this map as it really helps demonstrate quite how powerful the City Fringe market is and how popular it is with tech startups. As it shows, since 2020, the venture capital raised by startups by their closest tube station. It clearly shows the City Fringe as a hugely dominant force in central London. With Old Street here being the biggest in the whole of London, and the City Fringe, if you combine the markets, totaling over $20 billion of investment since 2020, which is more than many European countries. So as you know, growing popularity of a market leads to an increased demand and rising rents, and that is certainly true of the City Fringe. We can see how the city has tracked above the fringe for a good few years, with Clerkenwell and Farringdon and Old Street and Shoreditch actually converging a lot sooner than many may think in 2013. The Aldgate market has always trended at a discount to the city, but it certainly still seems to be the case today. But Farringdon and Clerkenwell in about 2018 actually overtook the city, and that was around about the time when Crossrail was supposed to have opened. So as the rents have gone up, so have the quality of the buildings, and therefore the quality, calibre and style of the occupiers. And this graph shows how the occupier base in City Fringe has moved from being heavily dominated by creative industries to being much more balanced and more in line with an occupier mix of more core markets. Growth and demand from more corporate business services can be seen, and we've really felt that on the ground. We used to talk about deals like LinkedIn next door at the Ray or Moonpig at Herbal House. But more recently, we've done deals with Partners Group taking 40,000 feet at JJ Mack, and Julius Baer, the huge Swiss bank, taking space at Bleeding Heart Yard and moving their HQ from the city core. So what does this future look like for the City Fringe? Well, the pipeline looks similar to the rest of London, with a hugely constrained supply through 2028 to 29. And the reality is that 29 spike is only due to the fact that we put schemes 3 years out from where we are today, being the earliest deliverable time. So I just thought, before I hand over to the panel, we'll touch on a few of the schemes to give a flavour of what could be delivered over the next few years. So Xylo, just down the road, Clerkenwell Road, PSC designed building, Global Holdings delivered, 90,000 foot scheme due for completion towards the end of 2026. 225 City Road, formerly the Arc, are now undergoing some internal refurbishment works before being relaunched. Strauss House, 50 Great Sutton Street, a huge redevelopment of the 1960s building, a 50,000 square foot building due for completion. And then if we start to look even further out, buildings like 99 City Road, the old Inmarsat building on the old street roundabout, close to 500,000 square feet, due for completion in late 28 with Namfang and Endurance Landing Control. And in the heart of Shoreditch, the Red Church, Blue Coast Capital's 150,000 foot scheme, also due for delivery in late 28. And loads of schemes will be interesting to watch to see what sort of occupiers look at them, what sort of rents they achieve, and to see how they contribute to the evolution of the City Fringe market. So clearly a very varied market, which will no doubt continue to evolve over time. And the new deliveries in the area will continue to help us understand how the fringe market will contribute to the wider London market. No doubt the panel will have a lot more to say on this. So with that, I'll hand over.
Hello, can everyone hear us? Perfect. One of my roles before I sort of start is to be a timekeeper. So hopefully we will do this within 35 minutes, and there's an opportunity at the end for any questions from here. And I understand we're also getting questions from the camera at the back there. So please think about the questions as we go. So let me just start. The Face ID goes. So again, welcome to the Waterman. In Farringdon, great for everyone to work incredibly hard to get here. The question that we're going to challenge ourselves with is actually, what is the City Fringe? Tom, thanks for all those comments. Actually, in a way, there's lots of great facts there, but actually probably provokes a number of questions that we will touch on. I'm not going to introduce the panel because I think they can do it themselves, but this is Stephen, Piers, Ruth and Nikki, a fantastic group of people to be able to answer some of the important questions. We purchased this in 2012, and it was definitely a gritty environment. And actually, people talked about the City Fringe. I am not convinced the City Fringe was a pleasant statement. I actually think in reality, it was responding to the area it was in. Has it become the destination for choices? Someone mentioned LinkedIn, I think our neighbours, but there's Snapchat and TikTok have come here. You know, is it a creative location or a place where architects are or the creative agencies? I think there's lots of different choices, but really, is this the tech zone? Probably not because of the other choices, but we'll talk about that. Is this better value? Tom mentioned it was. I'm not so sure because we're starting to produce great products here that are challenging values that are in the city and around. Is it distinctive architecture that's creating the change here? Or is it, as Sean from Compton says, it's a cooler vibe? Or is it Farringdon and what's happened with the Elizabeth line? Has that created the change? So we've got lots of questions. But to start with, if we start with Stephen, I think, I'm actually going to ask each of the panels to define what they think the City Fringe is and maybe suggest what's happening in the future and the change. So Stephen, if you can. Go first.
Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me. So I'm Stephen Biggs, one of the corporate directors at Islington Council. You're in Islington, so welcome to Islington. Gritty but authentic, I think we would probably say. But let's not debate Islington. A wonderful place, but I'm biased. So I guess, and as Tom said, you can define places, can't you, in very sort of technical ways. I mean, I look after our planning department. Our planners will define it very technically. But I guess my answer would be it has to be about people and places. And if I just think about the bits of the City Fringe in Islington, so I'll take two very quickly. One is what we call Bun Hill, so sort of north and south of Old Street, and that's just an incredibly diverse area. It's got, you know, it's the heart of Tech City, and I'm sure we'll come on to that, and really successful. You know, we've got loads of Islington residents who live there. Also, a lot of people in social housing. Some of that's overcrowded. We've got significant areas of poverty in that part of the borough. We delightfully call Bun Hill a heat island. You can imagine that, but it is really susceptible to the impact of climate change as well. So you've got this, you know, I'm sure would say a hugely successful economy, but also a place that people live, and not everybody is, you know, succeeding in that part of the world. And we'll talk perhaps a bit later on about, you know, how we can work together to help everybody benefit. You know, close to home, Clerkenwell, sort of over there. Again, you know, a world centre of architecture, creative design, City University, but again, you know, real mixture of haves and have-nots. So I guess my message is, yeah, the City Fringe is a place with people that live here. We'll talk a lot about the future of commercial development. Should we have mixed use? But it's always been mixed use of sort of residential and commercial. So I guess it's important to bring it to life, and it's clearly changing, isn't it? It has challenges, and then we'll talk a lot about the commercial market. You know, we are just in the process of disposing of 4 not very nice office blocks on Old Street, and we were told before disposing there were 80 other buildings of a similar quality, similar low quality, empty. So it's a real challenge. So we get that from a planning perspective, get the opportunities around thinking carefully about more mixed use development. But I guess I'd say there's a huge opportunity. Definitely not gritty, definitely opportunities, but I think challenges to sort of work together to understand what that sustainable future is for the City Fringe.
When I started my career back in the early 90s, if you were sent to Old Street, you thought you'd done something wrong. It wasn't really a place where there was a lot of business activity taking place, but boy, how that's changed, and for the good. I'm not going to try and explain the geography of it because you all know it, but the boomerang from here all the way around to Wapping, I suppose, it's lots of different markets. There are different areas of speciality, and traditionally you'd say that Old Street has attracted more tech firms, and around here actually it's been more finance driven. But there's always been a broad mix of occupiers and a broad mix of stock as well. Big changes taking place. The elephant in the room, the Elizabeth line, absolutely infrastructure. You put infrastructure in and activity will take place. But you've got the expansion of the city. And I think one of the things is that a lot of the city fringe, so-called, isn't actually fringe anymore. I don't think anyone would actually consider Farringdon to be fringe. You think it's at the junction of the Elizabeth line and Thameslink. You can go from Cambridge to the south coast coming through here, and you can connect en route if you want to go east and west on the Elizabeth line. So Farringdon for me is absolutely core now, and the rents are pretty clearly substantiating that. We have put lots of money, lots of investment into this area, and we will continue to do so. It's a thriving one. It's got a good mix of occupiers. It's not too heavily dominant on one, although tech is probably becoming increasingly prevalent in a good way in the sort of the western part, northern and western part of the fringe. But from my perspective, it's all positive. Although I would just say a caveat that the really good times have passed. You know, if you needed to be here before the Elizabeth line was commenced to have found the right opportunities, pricing is remarkably difficult, or for us to find fair pricing.
Ruth? Morning. Thank you very much, Alex, for the introductions. In terms of the city fringe, it is quite an interesting area, and as Piers said, it is very much that boomerang from a geographical perspective, from north to east. And I actually very much started my career working in the city fringe in Tower Hamlets at Aldgate, and also lived there for many years as well. And some may say it's gritty. I would say that it's probably got more of a unique edge to it, which I think makes it quite an interesting proposition, but also an exciting opportunity. And I think its unique juxtaposition with the city also brings with it both opportunities and challenges as well. I think, you know, there are a lot of marginalised communities. It is very densely populated, and it does have that influence from the city, which I think makes it a very dynamic and transformative place. And I think the city fringe has always been a place of transition, with lots of transient communities that have moved through. If you look back, particularly in East London, in and around Aldgate, you have the rag trade, you've now got Bangla Town, and now we've got these new exciting opportunities that are presenting itself. And I think the arrival of the Elizabeth line has made an enormous impact in a positive way, but lots of other, I think, competing challenges that have also helped to move that forward. I think if we look at Tottenham Court Road in terms of the Elizabeth line there and the impact it's had for the Central District Alliance Business Improvement District, which covers the St Giles area, Bloomsbury, Holborn, Clerkenwell and Farringdon. And in the middle of that sits the Hatton Garden Business Improvement District. It's had an enormous impact because Tottenham Court Road is the third busiest station now, but equally our area is very much anchored by both Farringdon and Tottenham Court Road. And I think for me, it's very much about not forgetting the people that reside within the City Fringe, that sit alongside all these amazing opportunities that are currently being generated. And I think it is about connecting people. It's about thinking about the impact of the property values, the regeneration and the gentrification that's going to happen. And I think it's really important that one of the things we need to think about is really balancing the need of it for investment and commercial gain, sitting alongside the opportunities that we need to generate for the local communities and the small businesses that currently operate there as well. So I think my key message in terms of the City Fringe and what it means to me is let's not erode a lot of that unique character and distinctiveness that makes the City Fringe the place that it is today and that very attractive location for a lot of these new sectors that are moving in.
Thanks. I'm going to largely echo a lot of what's already been said, but I think the City Fringe has evolved so much in the last 10 to 15 years, and that evolution probably means that it's maybe larger than one title. So City Fringe just spans such a wide range of markets. I mean, to take three of our buildings, so the Loom in Aldgate East, the Bower in Old Street, and then our former building, the JJ Matt building, just down the road. They're so different. They couldn't be more different in every single way, in their architectural style, in their tenant profile, in their rents, but also in their vacancy rates. And so to define those all under the same umbrella, I think is maybe slightly erroneous. But I guess the one unifying factor that links all of these places together is that uniqueness of character. And maybe that's like cachet for people who want to be located somewhere that is maybe just slightly more interesting, that's going to appeal more to the younger workforce, good for connectivity, good for culture, good for after work, food and beverage and things like that. So I'll leave it there because we're probably running out of time already.
No, time is good.
Excellent.
So I've taken 4 things from that. We have the words authentic, we have unique edge, a wide range of markets, and Farringdon is core. So I think that probably allows me to ask Piers the next question. What makes the City Fringe such a good location, albeit now the city core?
Yeah, well, I've touched on it on my last answer a little bit. You've got a really diverse range of markets. Nikki's has just spoken about the fact that within there are 3 buildings with vastly different characteristics, tenants, etc. We want to get ourselves exposure to good buildings, which we create in locations that are going to be popular. The Elizabeth line provides us with an opportunity for our occupiers to get to the buildings, even on strike day, that really is fundamental for us. The other reason is that there was, and I stress was, quite a significant rental discount. So traditionally, the city core would have been quite a big discount. A lot of cost-conscious occupiers would have come there, whether they were professional services or sometimes the secondary functions of financial institutions. That has fundamentally changed. And looking at the rents that have been achieved around here are at, and in some cases exceeding, the city core at the time of their lettings. So that's a bit harder for us to find good value right now. The leasing market is a bit more volatile. The advantage you've got here is that you've got a slightly broader range of occupiers, but we have invested heavily along the Elizabeth line. We've done it at Whitechapel, and we've done it in the City of London, and we've done it in the West End. We haven't been able to find anywhere around Farringdon because we've been beaten to it by Nikki and others. But absolute timing is absolutely everything, and we would definitely find opportunities here, whether it be for our HQ new developments or alternatively our shorter term flex product. We like the fact that there's, as I say, a range of occupiers, a range of buildings, And I can't remember who touched on it. The vibe of the area, the authenticity. It's quite around Cowcross Street, around Smithfields. Very, very exciting, interesting place. Not sort of stereotypical of chains, etc. A more exciting place to be.
I think it sort of brings on to that question of challenge in terms of acquiring assets. We've got that challenge across the whole of London. But I think with Stephen here being from Islington, it would be really interesting to understand how Islington feel about connecting and working together, and the role that you're playing to support us as developers and owners to deliver that quality that we've just been talking about. So, Stephen.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's all about, the world's difficult at the moment, so it has to be about partnership and relationship and, excuse me, and I think some honesty and openness as well. I mean, I know several in the room, and we need to have just very straightforward conversations, because there really is an opportunity and some uniqueness, but it will only come from sort of working together. And I mean, maybe just talk about, two very, I would think, practical and impactful things we've been doing with several people in the room and elsewhere in the City Fringe. One is what we call our LIFT programme. So for those of you who are familiar with that, it's a joint programme actually with a number of other City Fringe boroughs, so Hackney, Tower Hamlets, and Camden as well. And the LIFT programme is basically about employment and skills opportunities. And it started really and it's a really interesting example of how the City Fringe is evolving, but some of the challenges it has as well. So it started with Old Street and tech really not working for local people. So it was a huge success for the local economy, but there was this mismatch of local skills and employment and employers. And when we started talking to the employers in the shiny towers of Old Street, it was, we would really like to work with local people, to employ local people, to support early stage careers and apprenticeships and skills, but we don't have a clue how to engage with local people. And then conversely, talking to our residents, it was, well, we'd love to work in the shiny towers, but we don't know how to. And my team hate this because it's much more sophisticated, but basically LIFT is this dating agency that brings together employers and skills and talent, and it's been hugely successful. And please join some of their events, but it's brought together some brilliant businesses and some brilliant local people, and work for both of them really. So LIFT is a sort of great example where we focus on what's always the fundamental issue in growth and development, which is people and skills, and bridging a gap that was absolutely there and absolutely not working really for either side. So LIFT, I think, is a great example of how we can work in partnership across boroughs. The other one, and I'll get some scowls from some people perhaps in the audience elsewhere, is our affordable workspace programme. And actually the Ray building down there, which is the LinkedIn building, there's something called Better Space in the basement, which was one of our first affordable workspaces, which is a huge opportunity. But the affordable workspace programme is a key part of our local plan for those who aren't aware. And it starts on the basis that it is, for all the reasons we talked about, as a local startup, a local business, a local entrepreneur, it is still almost impossible to afford the rents in a place like Islington. So that means either your business stops before it's starting, or you create your business and go and move it elsewhere, which is no good for anybody. So affordable workspace is using the local plan, using planning policy to carve out a proportion of affordable workspace in our new developments. And the Ray building's a great example where that's worked. And again, that's working in partnership. I know we've got some colleagues from Derwent in the room we've worked together with. We talked about 99 City Road, which, by the way, is a brilliant example of joint development. And we've worked really closely with Endurance to create a great opportunity for everybody. So again, I think affordable workspace is another example of how we can work together to build the vibrancy, but make sure it works for everybody as well. It's not just the big anchor tenants, it's also our SMEs and other businesses. And of course, the anchor tenants really like working with the startups and the businesses. And we always say that the best outcome is that one of those affordable workspace tenants, wouldn't it be great if eventually they could afford to pay a market rent for a building and move on? So it's real success. I think probably, Alex, just a couple of examples of how working in partnership can really make a difference, in places like the City Fringe.
I think, again, incredibly important points there. The LIFT programme, it was described to me slightly different in the name, but in essence, the importance there is yes, there's developers, there's investors, and there's teams delivering, but we're also asking the occupiers to support that, because in terms of creating that true social value and support from a sustainability perspective, we need to link everything. So this sort of brings me on to the questions of occupiers, and there are lots of interesting dynamics, and Tom mentioned some of them relating to the divergence between places that people will work, which is a little bit larger in the city. And then we've got a little bit of a constrained development pipeline. There's some others, obviously, developers out there that will be trying to pick up that. So in terms of occupiers, Ruth, what do you think are the types of businesses that are choosing to locate here? And what type of business do you think we should be targeting to try and hit? Or is it open for everybody?
Okay, so from a CDA perspective, we've seen quite significant change, and whilst we represent we represent 5 very distinct areas across the CDA footprint. Each of them are very, very different, and they all have their own USP. And as we've heard from the panelists this morning, we do have quite a diverse range of business sectors that sit across that footprint. But we represent 400 members of our business improvement district, and we have welcomed the arrival of some of the new businesses who have obviously relocated to the CDA area. So, we've got Google, we work with LinkedIn, we have Snapchat, we've got an emerging life sciences sector with the redevelopment of Victoria House and GSK now taking space for their headquarters on Tottenham Court Road. We've got a thriving media and tech sector. We've got Warner Brothers, NBC Universal, and we have Outernet, which has now been named the 5th top tourist attraction in central London, and in its first year of opening had over 6 million visitors within its first year. So really has landed and has made an incredible impact. I do think it's very much about the City Fringe being open to everybody. I do think it's having that diverse range and broad mix. But I think it also comes back to the point that Stephen made, that let's also look at the existing fabric that's here. And again, back to that ecosystem and how valuable that is. Because whilst it's about these big new corporates moving in, it's also about the preservation of those smaller businesses and how we can blend them together so that they can continue to flourish and thrive. And I think the role of the Business Improvement District is very much offering that local stewardship in terms of making the place welcoming, making sure it's clean, it's safe, but also really working with our local businesses so that we can generate a thriving and dynamic and vibrant ecosystem in which people want to invest and to locate in.
What does Helical think in terms of occupiers? You talked earlier about 3 schemes. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are from a Helical perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that going back to the previous point, the occupiers of all of those different schemes are completely different. And I think that one of the things that has changed potentially is the landlord's approach to leasing, and to maybe just having a bit of a greater degree of flexibility in terms of the leases that we provide, particularly in those buildings such as the Borough, such as the Loom over in Aldgate East, where we've got some tiny studios of 1,000 square foot right up to spaces of 10,000 square foot. And I think that it is possible, kind of going back to the whole affordable workspace and incubator space, it's possible to do that. If you've got a building like that, it's possible to do it within the building. We do it similarly at the Borough. We've got Beyond at the Borough, where we can offer anything from almost one desk up to a whole suite. And then genuinely, we do see people growing through that and then coming out and taking space in the wider building. And it's something that we've done for a while. But I think particularly in the City Fringe market, it is something that's really prevalent and really important at the moment, because the rate of growth of a lot of these businesses is just huge. And even in our larger scale buildings, we're having discussions with occupiers who really don't know their forecast of headcount now, next year, 5 years' time. So it's an issue that I think as landlords, there's a lot that we can do to help tenants overcome. In terms of the different things that tenant wants in the building, it depends, again, building to building, but something that we're really seeing, tenant amenity is obviously really important, but particularly in those smaller buildings where you have potentially got people in smaller studios, things like bookable meeting rooms, things like touchdown workspace that allow that space that they've actually taken to be a bit expanded by having those amenities that you can use outside of your immediate office footprint. So we're putting lots of things like that in offices, both big and small. Sustainability is obviously super important and something that we are incorporating in all of our buildings. But just in terms of how things have changed from 15 years ago to now. It can be more different. And it's just up to all of us to kind of keep up with the changing demands of tenants and the changing kind of occupational lease demands as well.
I spoke to my kids last night about what I was doing this morning, and I said, I'm going to ask a question about tech. And I said Snapchat and all the rest of it. And then I said LinkedIn, and they just laughed at me saying that's not tech. But we've got a lot of people that have joined the Fringe. The question I think just quickly to Piers is, what's your view about tech location? Is there a tech city? Is it defined? It sounds like from everyone else it isn't, but I'd be interested to know what you think.
Well, if you look back at the statistics for the last sort of 20 years, the eastern part of the Fringe has absolutely been dominated by tech, and that's been and that's a position that's actually just got stronger and stronger, particularly around Old Street. The western or northern part, much more diverse. It used to be more financial business services and professional services. Just to give you a bit of a contrast to that, so at our Hickman building in Whitechapel, we've got a large communications company, so no tech there. An architect that used to be based not about 100 meters from here is now at Old Street in a building that we built there. So it isn't all about tech, but tech is fairly significant. I think it'll be hard to displace in and around Old Street. It's got a good hold, and that's a positive thing, because it allows people other businesses to be attracted there, and you get all the benefits of agglomeration and that sort of thing. Here, in the western or northern part, it's definitely growing. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But you've also seen large occupiers from financial services, because this is core. I said at the beginning that the Farringdon zone would absolutely, and I'm sure Tom will back me up on this, would be considered to be a core location now. I think that a lot of businesses have become much more building specific. So the building has to be the right size, it has to be the right specification, it has to have the right sustainability credentials. And infrastructure changes such as the Elizabeth line allow businesses to be a little bit more footloose in where they're going. Because if they don't find the right building in the places where they would traditionally have been, or they think that the rental profile is too high, then there are more opportunities. We've seen that within our own portfolio of people moving around. One thing I would say is that I think the tech sector is much more volatile. So you can see Old Street booming one day and just a little bit struggling the next. Ditto Whitechapel. And the most important thing for any of these sub-markets is to have enough diversity so that you can have a smoothed out level of demand. It gives confidence for developers to put money into areas, and it allows those areas to thrive, the businesses to feed off each other, etc.
It also changes a lot over time. So I think as a developer, you don't want to design a building with one tenant in mind, and I'm kind of thinking of the Bower here, which is now 10 years old, and we deliberately designed that so it wasn't super techy, because that would have been an error, as we've seen over the passage of time. So when we let it initially, it was quite tech, not exclusively, but now the tenant profile is much wider. And to your point, the tech sector has been much slower to bounce back. And so if that building was just purely designed for that particular sub-market, that would be an error. So I think it's really important across the City Fringe to have buildings that can appeal to a wide range of occupiers, so that the vacancy rates can stay as low as possible.
I think one of the things that actually the BCO have just come out with is what is the definition of a grade A building, which used to be in the old days, it was, well, it's got a raised floor, it's got air conditioning and suspended ceiling, etc. Well, that is long gone, and actually it's now about the amenity. And you look at the amenities that Helical and Derwent and ourselves are putting into buildings, and yourself, obviously, Alexander. These are chalk and cheese compared to buildings that we were putting up 20 years ago. If you'd asked about cycling 20 years ago, people would have looked at you with a slightly quizzical look about, well, there are some showers down there. Now the quality of the facilities and the scale of the facilities are substantial. I think in some cases the scale of cycling facilities is perhaps a little bit over provided for by TfL's requirements, but that's a personal gripe of mine.
Well, that's a good segue to my next question. I cycle to work 5 days a week, and actually cycling to work is important. I've been doing it for 20 years, and absolutely no question, in the last 5 years, the quality of the products is fantastic. 20 years ago, it was quite offensive, but I continue to cycle. Actually, this week it's been horrendous with the Lime bikers and all the people that don't know how to cycle, so it's been a bit rubbish. But we have touched on it, but I'm actually interested to hear a little bit about a couple of things. Is talk about cycling. We said that. Secondly, is just a reminder about transport. How important is that? Whether or not the City Fringe or anything else, I'd be interested to know what you think.
I think it's hugely important. The Elizabeth line has obviously been absolutely massive, and it's really cemented buildings like JJ Mack Building, like Bloom, and those areas, to Piers's point, are now core for those reasons, and it underpins the rents that have been able to be achieved in those buildings. I think, if it's not too controversial to say, it's kind of had an almost unintended slight negative effect on some other areas, because now you find that people have to be on the Elizabeth line, and actually, apart from this week, it's not the only way to travel around London. And so, you know, we're constantly trying to re-educate people that the Central line's really good, guys, even though it's not. But yeah, thanks. But obviously, you know, it's of huge importance, and it's been a total game changer for the city. And the cycle lanes too. You know, we've got quite a few buildings that are located on cycle superhighways, and that's really great. Apart from this week when they're just
I would say, as a cyclist, the where you don't go is on the superhighways because it's just too dangerous. Bikers. So,
and then you've got me going along really slowly.
I think the other thing that we did touch on, and I'm actually going to bring Ruth into this, is that we spend a lot of time talking about the social value, about culture, about the opportunities and what's outside of our buildings. You've touched on it a little bit earlier, so it'll be good to hear your thoughts on cultural assets, leisure, what's happening in the area.
Yeah, definitely. And I think culture it's incredibly important because it is about attracting and retaining really good talent. And I think a lot of the younger workers today look more at lifestyle than just salary. So it is about that offer that sits outside of the building and beyond the curtilage. I think if we look across the City Fringe, it really is very mixed use. I mean, Exmouth Market, I think, is an excellent example where you've got retail, you've got art, you've got food, you've got home, you've got businesses, but it's all how that coexists within that ecosystem and that framework. And to some degree, I feel it almost sort of supports those 15 principles around the 15-minute city. But I think what makes it attractive to investors is that through that cultural offer, it makes it a really vibrant and dynamic place. I think the City Fringe, and particularly with Crossrail now, because we've got Tottenham Court Road, we've got Farringdon, and we've got Whitechapel. So we've seen a huge increase in footfall, bringing people through to obviously to go on to their final destinations. So we've got a really good, solid level of footfall coming through, and again, I think that makes that a very interesting proposition to investors that are looking to invest in the City Fringe area. It is unique, it is authentic, and I think it's also building on that emerging economy, which is all around experiential, and people are looking much more for that experiential offer and what that can bring to the table, but also what can retain people after work as well. What does the offer actually look like? And I think if you look across the City Fringe, I kind of coined it that you've got Clerkenwell as design and craft, you've got Shoreditch as creative and cool, and you've got Whitechapel that's diverse and historic. And I think it's really looking at how you can build on all of those great attributes. But I also feel it's about adding value through cultural capital and not just square footage.
I think that actually, I'm going to pass the question to you, Stephen, is that we talked about offices, we talked about residents, we talked about social housing, we talked about challenges. And actually, what Ruth has just said is there's so many great things. So I suppose the question really from your perspective is, how do you see Islington and us working together? You've touched on a few things to deliver the response that we need to do for the wider part of the fringe, if we call it the fringe.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I mean, I think it's building on sort of Ruth's point and just reiterating something I said earlier on. I think the fundamental advantage and authenticity and all that stuff of the City Fringe is it's an actual place. So it's not something that is busy during the day and quiet during the evening. They are long established multi-generational communities, and really important just to keep coming back to that. And I think that's important. And vital, I would suggest, in terms of the sort of the investment and sort of growth challenge that we all have as well. So I think it's worth always starting with that point that it's a place, because it's a place that has all of the challenges that places have and people have. To Ruth's point, it needs to be sort of sustainable and inclusive and affordable, and markets, which we haven't got time for today, a great example of how you can build an inclusive economy. And it's possible, places like Exeter Market, Chapel Market, if people know, just up in the Angel, where you can get the right balance for folk that do want to have their £12.50 fancy sandwich at lunchtime, they can have it. But for folk that need to get their groceries and can't afford £12.50, you can have it as well. So it's about building, real places. And therefore, I'd suggest that in terms of the inward investment, the growth challenge that we've already all got, that's a pretty good place to start. And then I guess maybe the other part of the answer is, it's always great, isn't it, being the representative of the local planning authority in meetings like this, and clearly we are responsible for all ills in the world. But we've absolutely, I won't start bleating about, we've got a hard job to do, but we've got a crucially important role to do, to work with everybody in this room and elsewhere to take advantage, to build on that, but also to recognise, you can just look out your window here. Islington is the most densely built up environment in the country, and the City Fringe is probably equally so in places like Tower Hamlets as well. So every single development opportunity is just massively important we get right, because there are so few of them. So when you think like we drive a really hard bargain, you'd need to drive a hard bargain to your tenants. It's just really important, isn't it? Because we don't have huge brownfield sites, whether commercial, residential. So in my sort of simple world, it's just really important we do that. Rest assured, we're all very aware, it's a bit difficult at the moment, of the land uses as well. So we're not just give away stuff because it's going to come back even if it's here. But simply, it's just really important we get it right. But I think there's a huge opportunity here to do so. And I'll stop my sales pitch now, but yeah, for the avoidance of doubt, our door is absolutely open to have these conversations. We've talked about some brilliant examples of where we do it together, but we will drive a hard bargain, because actually you need to have a hard bargain because you won't get tenants, but it's just that opportunity and these little opportunities that don't come along very often. Hopefully there's no one from Inmar sat here, but personally I think it's the world's ugliest building, so I'm very, very happy it's knocked down. But actually, much more importantly, the thing that Endurance are doing, I keep coming back to it because it's a recent example, is brilliant for everybody. Now, there's an awful lot of square footage that someone's got to move into, but what a great example, I think, of what we can do in a really difficult market. So I'll stop there, Alex, and some colleagues, but I just think there's a hugely, I'll come back to the authentic local community to build on, with just brilliant talent, brilliant opportunities, brilliant places to eat, brilliant everything, great partner in CDA and everything else here. But when we do have those opportunities, it's incumbent on us to really work hard to get a brilliant outcome, I guess is what I'd say.
I think that's a great way to stop. And in terms of timings, we're pretty close to timings now. So I'm going to ask if there's anyone has a burning question from the audience, or secondly, if there's any burning questions from that lovely camera at the end there.
Hi, my question is to Stephen. What's the definition of affordable workspace? Is it 20% below market, or is it less than that? And what are the terms?
Well, sounds like we need to have a conversation afterwards, but they're very reasonable. So 80%. So in simple terms, when we secure affordable workspace, the rents are capped at no more than 80%. Clearly, we expect a mixture because a lot of people can't afford 80%, but it is 80% is the sort of simplest answer to your question. So not a million miles away from market, but enough in our view that makes a difference. But we would ideally want a lot of rent products within that building that create more affordability, but 80% is the simple answer.
Thank you, Stephen.
Really interesting talk from you all. I'm always think about architects as good canaries as to where good, funky, exciting places are. And 30 years ago, it seemed to me they were all in King's Cross. And in the subsequent time, they've kind of been priced out there. They come down here. What's with all the talk this morning, all of which I agree with, what is the danger that City Fringe becomes a victim of its own success? Talk to Nikki's point, talk about the rate of these growth. By definition, if they're startup, they want to grow. And you've obviously talked about flexibility in your rents for these folk or the spaces. But what's the danger that this part of town becomes a victim of its own success? And what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen? To all of you.
Do you want to take this? I think you've got a complete range of building sizes and types, and you'll continue to have that. There'll be planning restrictions that stop certain developments happening. There'll be places for brand new development. There'll be places increasingly for retrofit projects. And there will be retained buildings where the level of intervention is quite small. So I don't think that there will ever be a lack of opportunity. Rents will inevitably rise. That is life, even if it's just pure inflation. And there are, and you're right, that architects and other professional services, designers, etc., will have always sought out good value places. And there will be places within the whole of the city fringe. They may get pushed further eastwards. They may get pushed a little bit further northwards. But I'm pretty certain that there will always be a place for a pretty broad range of occupiers within the fringe. Yeah, I'm not worried.
Could I just build on that? I just wanted to say, I think it's a really good question. And I think it's very much around partnership working. So I think it's down to the local authority, the property developers, the business improvement districts, and other stakeholders in terms of how we work collaboratively together to make sure that we maximise growth, but also don't lose sight of inclusivity as well. And I think it is about making sure that we can help some of those current businesses retain their status within those footprints. And there is already emerging evidence where rents are going up, property values are increasing, and some small businesses are having to close down. So I think we need to be very mindful of that if we want to make it a really inclusive district that retains its vibrancy, but it remains authentic as well.
Any other questions from?
Hello, good morning. I'm Alex Jan. I'm actually both with London Property Alliance and also the BID, so apologies for the multiple conflicts here, Hatton Garden and CDA. We've talked a lot about the city fringe. We haven't really talked about the city. And my question is, to what extent do we need to think about how the city and the city fringe boroughs interact, both in terms of development and local authority wise? Is there more that we could be doing to strengthen links between the square mile and these areas with all the challenges and opportunities that have been highlighted to produce a better outcome for everybody?
Do you want to take that?
I can. Yes. Yeah. Good. Hello. Good. Yeah. No. Good question. Yes, I think, and actually, I'd say the same for neighbouring authorities as well. So I think there's more we could do. I mean, certainly from a Islington perspective, we work well with the corporation, but I think they'd say the same. That's probably more tactical than strategic. So really important tactical stuff. So Smithfield's Market, Museum of London development is a good example, right on our border. A huge opportunity for all of us here. Tricky is an example. We've talked about some of the work around sort of travel and what we call livable neighbourhoods, and that's where boundaries become completely artificial. And so we've done some good joint work, for those of you who know, sort of south of Old Street, around the Barbican area, which has certainly got some sort of archetypal sort of concrete jungles and car-dominated areas, and you can't start drawing the boundary in that case between Islington and the corporation. So yes, I think to answer, we do some good work together, I'd say, and I think we'd both say it needs to be more strategic. Some of that is harder than you'd want given the constructs, but I think there's more to do. And yeah, you can't start drawing artificial boundaries around what is the fringe, what is the city, and there's clearly benefits in blurring the boundaries, I guess, to some degree.
We've got time, I think, for one more question, unless there's one from the camera. Is there any from the camera? Oh, no, from the camera. Would you like to ask a question? Okay.
So, Charles Begley, Chief Executive CPA. I just want to thank the panel. So it's more of a statement, but there is a question for you. But there is a question for you, Alexander. But no, fantastic panel, and brilliant that so many people have come in. I'm really interested. You haven't really touched on it, and it's unusually modest for you, Alexander. But what a fantastic building! And we've all been blown away. I'm so pleased we persevered with this. And, you know, I know it's difficult for everyone. I think Ruth told me she was up at 4:30 this morning to get here in time. So,
Well,
yeah.
I know. Gold star.
And, you know, yeah, people sleeping around the corners. But no, it was absolutely fantastic. But Fathom have, you know, the architects have done a fantastic job. So I wonder if you could, yeah, you may have planned this anyway, but it'd be great to, I think it's 3 buildings merged into one, and, you know, some of the challenges with this and who the occupiers you're targeting, given that we've talked about the different tenant mix and the opportunities.
It's fair to say I hadn't planned to be asked that question, but I'll happily answer it a little bit more detail later. I mean, the thing here is this was actually 8 individual buildings that was converted into 4 individual buildings, and you can see by the different buildings that was leased out at 2,500 square feet, and it just was rolling. And it was obvious that the market that everyone is hearing is changing, is that was good for part, but actually what we need to do is create connection, keep the authenticity of the brickwork and the connection and open it up. And actually, Fathom, I can't remember when we first started working with them, but that was the challenge we set. We wanted a 10,000 square foot floor plate. We wanted to be in Farringdon, but we wanted to keep that nice connection relating to the way it was broken up. We didn't want to lose the status of it being that sort of Victorian warehouse. And actually, we worked incredibly well with Islington. It's fair to say this was deemed to be a listed building, albeit it wasn't. And we worked incredibly hard to protect the authenticity of the design externally as well as internally. And what you can see is fantastic on the floor plate, but we have sensitively added additional space, which we needed to do to make it viable. And we've created we talk about amenity, you know, you have all the bikes and all the rest of it. But if you haven't seen Alfred's Cub when you came in, you absolutely need to go and see it. It is a fantastic design concept that allows you to change what a reception is into a space that people use. It's not just you come in, say hello and go up. So that's incredibly important. And the other last thing I would say is the views from this location, 360 degree, is unbelievable. You get to see how the city has grown. And actually, talk about Fringe, it's only a cricket ball's distance away. It's really close. And then you get this really great urban context with behind us, which actually is incredibly good at designs and sports. So I don't know if I said everything that Fathom would say. They'd probably say a lot more. But actually, it was a great collaboration of Islington, a great collaboration of the team together. And in terms of occupiers, everything people have said, we've had through the door. We are having a number of conversations, quite detailed ones, whether or not it is architectural, whether it's tech, whether it's the creative sector. Everything we've said here is looking at it. But the advantage is that we've got these single floor plates that are easy to break up as well. So that's the other advantage that we've got in keeping the building. So I don't know if I've answered that, but if I haven't answered it, please ask any questions afterwards. But I'm just going to now close. I'm just going to remind a few things that were said. Authenticity, core, it's unique, it's wide-ranging, multiple occupiers, diversity. This is a great place to work. This is a great place to invest. This is a great place to invite new occupiers here. And I think we're all here to celebrate this location. I don't know if I'm going to call it the City Fringe. We shall see. Thank you very much. Thanks, Nikki.